What's up, future shred lords? Welcome back. Death to the fingers. It's too hot out today for me to do a real video. Plus, I'm still dealing with the finger, man. Can you believe that stuff? I played on Thursday. Just that little tiny bit. And it came back with a vengeance. I mean, it feels better, but... really? It's the worst, too, because all I really want to do is just play guitar. And I'm starting to go squirrely now. I've tried to resist my temptation, but oh my God, it's just killing me. And look what happens every time I do. I'm like, I can't take it anymore. I play a little bit and it just comes back and I'm just like, why am I being tortured? It is what it is. Anyways, I'm part of this Facebook group and I'm not really on Facebook because honestly, I despise the platform. Same thing with Instagram for the same reasons. It's just so awful there. But having said that, one of my other friends were part of these, you know, some weird group on there of music educators, if you will, that we just talk about stuff and they're like, come on, we need some people to discuss this issue with respect to learning songs and stuff like that. Is it worthwhile in terms of like a music education? And I'm like, it really depends on context. You don't need me to show up to this thing. I don't even want to. And they're like, please. I almost, feel bad now. And so I was like, okay, sure. And of course, it just turned into an absolute shit show. I was like, wow. Did that ever escalate, man? It just went nuclear. Look. This is, and it just kind of got me thinking about it. I was like, this is a good topic because it's, it straddles that line between the person that thinks they're a musician and the person that is a musician. Just because or I should put it this way, if you can only play covers, you haven't quite hit the musician stage yet. You have musicianship. And you can operate in a musical context. But a musician is a person that can reason out the who, what, where, and when, if you will, of, music theory and then apply it to the fretboard in a musical context to achieve a result. Basically, you're a mathematician that solves problems in the music world. Right? And now listen, music from other people, like covers and stuff like that, is very informative. Not only does it shape you in the early years, if you will, but it also, it has this indelible effect on you. It sort of imbues you with what kind of direction you're going to take your own music in. Now, listen, that's a very generalized statement, but you kind of get the vibe. When you go see Joe Bonamassa, you're not really guessing at what's going to come out, right? Like he's not going to hit you with the death metal. So that's kind of what I'm getting at there. But having said that, the thing is, how much value do you get out of this type of activity? And you have to sort of take it in consideration with the law of diminishing returns. Now, listen, there are huge advantages to practicing music that's already been written, okay? By learning covers by ear. Rick Beato does this all the time. I do too. It should be part of your regular practice session where you just basically learn music by ear. A lot of times, I like to use songs as benchmarks to be like, how good are you? Can you figure this song out on the first take? All the way through kind of situation based on this level of complexity. Now, the last time I tried, which was Porno Graffiti by Extreme, it was just, it was a nightmare and I failed utterly. And I was like, you're not ready for that. So that put a quick end to that. But I think you get the idea. For most classic rock and a whole bunch of other music and stuff, especially classic 80s metal and whatnot, it doesn't take me very long to figure the songs out. So the point I'm trying to make is if you're sort of approaching this tool, right, learning covers and stuff like that, from that perspective, it's very useful. It's a way to sharpen your ear training by figuring these songs out, it basically helps give a rationale to how to string chords and scales together. Now listen, there's a huge drop in the value of learning like the music value of a song, an actual song, versus just playing the solo of the song or one of them. Okay? That is a huge misconception. It's like when you try to make grandma's cookies and they just don't work out the same way as when grandma did it because she made it with love or whatever it is. Right? Don't ask. There's some sort of glitch in the processing there that just allows the magic to happen. And that's just it. You're trying to capture lightning in a bottle by just doing a poor facsimile of something that you're probably not even very good at and probably didn't practice that much. Not the solo itself, just the techniques involved. It's like trying to write the same paragraph somebody else would to describe this particular scene. Of course it's not going to happen. I'm going to look at yours and I'm going to look at theirs to be like, they're totally different, even if they're explaining the same situation. So that's where you start to run into a big disconnect there, is this idea that, yeah, you can listen to a solo and be like, that technique he was using is very appealing to me. Like, I had no idea what Dimebag was doing in the early days, like Cowboy from Hell. Crap. Cowboys. Yeah, I'll get there. Cowboys from Hell stuff, right? So that sharp 5 and everything that he kind of sneaks in, which is one of his trademark sounds, it really just caught my attention, but I didn't make the connection because it didn't sound like Malmsteen, right? It was just this new sort of configuration where he lumped it more with the pentatonic scale, and I'm just like, damn, that's awesome. So that's my point, is instead of trying to just learn the solo from Domination or something like that, I'd be like, okay, factor in how to start to incorporate this sharp 5 into your pentatonic runs. Like, where is the sharp 5 in relation to all these pentatonic runs, right? Like job number 1. And that's really the point here. You see, my way, if you will, which is just the musician's way, is you start to ask a question and then you sort of reverse engineer back to a point where you can pick up the instrument and then just figure it out. So you're like, okay, I'm starting in the Ionian position. There's 1, 2, 3. And then you're like, there's 5. So I have to go up a half step. So you get this new configuration, which in my opinion is the Dimebag configuration, right? So you figure that out in the Ionian position. Then you move to Dorian. You do the same process. It's like there's 2, 3. Then you're like 5's there. So I got this little configuration. So it goes, the 5, sharp 5, and then 6. So you get that little chromaticism in there. It's just, you see what I mean? One principle, you're like, what do I have to do to a major scale to get the harmonic minor equivalent? You have to take the 5th degree and raise it. So you get 1, 2, 3, 4, sharp 5, 6, 7. And when you play that sequence of notes, you get the harmonic minor sound. You see what I mean? And then when you start working through the 3 notes per string stuff, well, obviously by just using the basic modalization, you can now figure out where the sharp 5s are all over the neck. And then just pare it down to whether you're playing it as a pentatonic scale, or you're using 3 notes per string, or you're going in its entirety just the harmonic minor mode. And there it is. In one instance, you learn a solo, and you're like, okay, I've got a grasp of this one tiny little snapshot of the usage of this tool. The sharp 5 being combined with the minor pentatonic. But in this other instance, when I start to employ my mind, I'm just like, if I work backwards, if I start to think like Dimebag, well, over time, 5 years, I'll be able to know that stuff all over the fretboard, and not only be able to play this lick anyways, but I'll be able to come up with my own in the style of Dimebag. And so I can pay homage to the greats. Is anybody really impressed anymore when somebody posts a solo to like Crazy Train or whatnot? Yeah, it's difficult to play for sure. Or Beat It. Like, do not get me wrong. It takes a high level of skill, especially Beat It. That's got to be one of the harder solos to actually play, just because Eddie's such a madman with the whammy and just his vibe and his feel. Nobody actually gets it right either. You ever see that? They're really close, but then when you listen to the original, it's like glass. It's just so smooth. You know what I mean? That's the thing. Can't capture lightning in a bottle. You can't just copy somebody's style and expect it to come out right. All you can do is listen to what they did and marvel at the greatness of it, and then try to just apply it to yourself. That's why learning the solos is not as valuable as deconstructing it and extracting that essential information. So you can just sit here like a philosopher pondering the meaning of life or whatever it is for decades until one day it just, boom, the light bulb goes off and you know, you have your little Tesla moment. I don't think people appreciate that enough. You just toil and toil and toil with these concepts for a very, 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 very long time. And then one day, boom, it just all comes into focus. And you're like, wow, this is an incredibly useful tool for me to use now that you've cultivated it. But back in the day when you're like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing here. What, just learn somebody else's solo? You know what I mean? You realize that you'll spend 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years doing stuff like that, but you're not really any farther ahead as a player. Can't just pick the instrument up and create a piece of music. So that's why I devalue the sort of learning, you know, sort of currency, if you will, of playing other people's solos and stuff like that. Analyze them. Be like, that's awesome what they did there, connecting those two runs with diminished. But again, you're extracting this concept. Oh, diminished as like a passing sort of tool to go from one thing to another. It's this little intermediary step that just smooths out the transition. That's important. Not being able to actually just play this one particular version, of which that happens in millions of pieces of music. So that's where you got to sort of draw the line. Now, listen, if it's a solo you really, really like and all, and I know solos note for note and all the rest of stuff, but then do it. You know what I mean? It's just that if you like playing along to the music, I'm not saying don't, but just don't make that a central focus. Instead, try to retool your thinking to be like, okay, what was it about the solo that really got me all hot and heavy in the first place? And then try to put your finger on that and then try to understand what that is using whatever you know about music. Oh, look, they're using the pentatonic scale. Can you identify the elements? You know what I mean? That's where this stuff becomes important. When you're listening to a piece of music and you're like, oh, look, there's the G chord. you know you're onto something. There it is. Or, oh, there's D. And you can see the chords in your mind while they're playing it on the radio. You can see their fingers moving in a solo kind of situation when they're playing it on the radio. You're like, oh, I know how to do that. Right? And there it is. So the connection is made. The fact that the guitar's not in your hand is irrelevant at that point. So that's a huge one. Now, as far as learning the actual structure of a song, that's different because there's a whole bunch of stuff to be learned in there. And if obviously you kind of go up the food chain, you're going to start off with easier music like punk and metal and stuff like that can be pretty dumbed down. Right, and you're going to keep moving up the food chain until you get to more complex forms like progressive metal and jazz and blues and stuff like that. In certain instances, jazzy blues, I guess, is more likely it. Fusion, if you want to. But, you know, like, again, that's an evolution of the mind, not your raw playing skills. People can play music like that because they've developed their mind to the point where they can understand a piece of music like that and then create it. That's all it is. They're so good on the instrument, whatever that is, that they can just make music like that. That's natural to them, like walking around. To us, we're just like, what? But to them, it's just like Monday to Friday stuff. No, I saw an absolutely ridiculous shred video of Mateo Mancuso, and I was just like, and like, it's just like nuts, right? You're just like, wow, like, woo. And it's just like Monday to Friday stuff. He wasn't even breaking a sweat, man. Just sitting there, you know what I mean, with his 2-finger technique and stuff. It was insane. But what was coming out of the guitar, my mind could not comprehend. I was just like, it's so perfect too. We're talking like ultra low gain, perfect articulation, legato, articulation, just... You're not going to be able to osmose that, even if you learn his solos. You know what that is? That's someone who has just total mastery over the instrument. And maybe it comes by them naturally and stuff, and I'm sure there's a huge amount of hard work that went into it too. But the point being is that he's like one of 6 guys in the world that I can think of that's like that are just so monstrous. You're just like... Andre Nieri, Guthrie, Jason Richardson, Rick Graham, John Petrucci. There are more. Stephen Taranto. There's probably about 25 guys, realistically speaking, that are just, Alex Hutchinson, Jack Gardner. They're just, wow, just next level ridiculous. You can't copy that, man. All you can do is use the template to build up to it. And that's just it. When you learn the songs, it gives you like a behind the scenes look so that when you do start doing improvisations and you do start to solo, that you now have some sort of context and you can actually predict the next chord. I never thought I'd be able to do that. There was a huge portion of my guitar life where I'm just like, it's always a crapshoot whether I know what the next chord's going to be. And then just within the last 2 years or whatever it is, I started to notice that I could predict the next chord in the sequence. Now, listen, in a certain way, it can be 50-50 because it could be happy or sad, but most of the time, you know what you're getting into. So I knew what the chord was, and then I could plan accordingly, and I was just, quietly impressed with my own silliness. But that's the point. You see, I hit another milestone by being able to do something like that. And it would have never have come to me if I hadn't actually recognized that I didn't know if I could actually predict the next chord in the first place. It never occurred to me to be like, well, I actually sort of anticipating it. And that's the thing. People learn music, covers, watch videos on the internet, whatever it is, but there's no real sort of supervisory control going on. It's just like the mindlessly consuming of information that they hope is actually going to reveal some deeper truth on the instrument that never comes, because you're not actually investing mentally into this process to be like, I must synergize mind and body. And I know that sounds hokey as shit, but it is what it is. So are there pros? Yeah. You build up sort of like rhythm skills. You build up a lexicon of chord shapes and chord progressions. And you start to reveal sort of the more basic structures of music with respect to modern approaches, verse, chorus, pre-bridge, whatever it's going to be, outro, blah, 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 whatever. You start to actually understand these mechanisms so that you can now create your own songs to act as a backdrop for when you're doing improvisations or improvising. I'll get them out. I will. Right. So there it is. That's kind of the core understanding is that you're using it to build up your own skills, not just as a means to practice. It's practice with a stated purpose at the end of acquiring this wisdom, not just constantly, going to the well, if you will, and just plucking out another song and be like, I'll learn this one. Because eventually you just start forgetting the previous ones and they just kind of fall by the wayside and all the rest of that stuff. And then you just don't play them ever again. I know for a fact I have a list on YouTube that's got like 200 songs that I only remember about half of them now. I mean, I know 100 new songs, but the 200 songs that I can jam in my brain, it's basically that's the limit. I can't remember anymore after that. Starts getting hazy. That's why I got to work on your ear. But you get the point. Is you have to sort of approach it so that it's a tool that you can use to actually get better at your own sort of music and interpretation of music. Because nobody wants to hear you just spit out again a cover that's almost exactly like the one that you're doing. That's silly, right? Obviously, you have to put a bit of a spin on it, and that's where the musicianship comes in. So, all of these things, again, as I mentioned, have to be tempered under the sort of consideration of the law of diminishing returns. Eventually, learning other people's music just gets boring because you feel restricted. It's not really your own genuine ideas. So use them in the early days to sort of build up confidence and sort of skill quickly. But then as you sort of become more progressed, then branch out so that you have this new tool and then work on developing the confidence to just put your music out there. Everybody sucks. I'd write hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of songs, and half of them still suck. So it is what it is. And here's the thing, I'll tell you a weird story. The songs I thought were going to be awesome, people are like, yeah, it's okay. And the songs I'm like, all right, it's filler. Going on there ended up being some of the biggest smashes. So that's just it. What you think is irrelevant. People like what they like, and that's it. It doesn't matter if you like it or not. Okay, so, think of these activities, learning arpeggio sequences, using modal interchange, working in the diatonic scale system, building up your fretboard knowledge, visualizing the fretboard, working on the various systems, improvising, and now, of course, sort of building up your songs repertoire. It's all relative. Now, with the improvising thing, basically you can do any solo on any song if you're good with the minor pentatonic scale, 3 notes per string, some arpeggios, and, a few techniques. So you're pretty much good to go there. So you might as well just practice that stuff anyways and then work on your strengths and weaknesses rather than worrying about what somebody else was good at. You may never be good at that. That's a lesson that was hard learned for me. So don't waste your time. And instead use it as a backdrop to sort of deconstruct music itself and diversify. You should be doing some simple classical music, like these folk dances and stuff. Trust me. Makes a huge difference in the long run when it comes to actually developing proper music knowledge. It all counts in the end. Plus, it fundamentally changes your perspective. That was one of the best things I ever did with respect to playing guitar, which was go buy a $200 cheap classical guitar. It's still over there. Played it so much that I had to glue something over top of where I'd worn through, and it looked like Trigger from Willie Nelson there. And just started playing a bunch of classical music. And no, it doesn't have to be insanely hard. And yes, there's a lot of music that's very easy for you to play. And then once you start to analyze the chord structure and all the rest of that stuff, you find that not only do you get technically much, much, much better, much faster, but also you start to gain this awareness, this music spider sense for what goes together and when you should combine elements. That's its whole stated purpose. That's why they write everything like songs. Oh, here's a major one. Here's a minor one. Here goes major to minor and vice versa. So I think you're getting the point there. It's all a training platform. So use it as such. Instead of being like, I'll fill up my time and I think I'm getting adequate practice value from just learning this song. No. Learn the song, deconstruct the song, extract the pertinent information as it pertains to you about what it is that you liked about it, and then try to come up with something on your own terms that sort of emulates it. Take it to the extreme, start recording the ideas. Done. Don't ever just do something for the sake of doing it and then pretend like that's actually creative or even meaningful practice. It's not. It's musical masturbation. Now, do it once in a while, like eating a pizza or going to the movies or whatever. Sure. But every day, that's your entire practice regime? Negative. Right. I hope this video helps. It's a little distracted, but Sunday, and I stayed up for 24 hours yesterday. Because you know how it is. We'll see you in the next one.